In 1987, the small town of Stephenville, Texas, was shaken by the chilling murder of 32-year-old Susan Woods, found bound and lifeless in her bathtub. For nearly 2 decades, the case remained unsolved, leaving behind only whispers and unanswered questions. But in 2006, a breakthrough in forensic science uncovered a shocking truth that would forever change the narrative of her tragic death. In the quiet town of Stephenville, Texas, Susan Woods was known as a friendly face and a hard worker. At 32 years old, she had recently navigated the difficult waters of divorce from her husband, Michael Woods. Despite the emotional turbulence, Susan was determined to move forward with her life, maintaining her job at a local bank and keeping up with her social circles. July 28, 1987, started as an ordinary Tuesday for the residents of Stephenville. But as the day progressed, an unsettling silence fell over Susan's home. Her father, growing increasingly worried after failing to reach her by phone, decided to check on his daughter. What he discovered would forever alter the fabric of their small community. As Susan's father entered her home, an eerie stillness greeted him. The house showed no obvious signs of disturbance, but something felt terribly wrong. His worst fears were confirmed when he made his way to the bathroom. There, in a scene that would haunt him for years to come, he found Susan's body submerged in the bathtub. The local police were immediately called to the scene. As they arrived, the full horror of the situation became apparent. Susan's hands were bound behind her back, a clear indication that this was no accident. The bathroom, once a place of privacy and comfort, had become a crime scene. Investigators meticulously combed through the house, searching for any clues that might shed light on this brutal act. They noted that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Susan may have known her attacker. The house was largely undisturbed, with no evidence of robbery or a struggle in other rooms. In the bathroom, detectives found several cigarette butts, a potentially crucial piece of evidence. They also discovered fingerprints on the bathtub, offering hope for a quick resolution to the case. These physical clues, combined with the binding of Susan's hands, painted a picture of a calculated and deliberate crime. As news of the murder spread, shockwaves rippled through Stephenville. Residents struggled to comprehend how such a violent act could occur in their close-knit community. Friends and neighbors were questioned, each interview adding another piece to the puzzle of Susan's final hours. Initial reports indicated that Susan had last been seen alive the previous evening. She had spent time with friends, displaying no signs of distress or fear. This information only deepened the mystery surrounding her death. Who could have harbored such malice towards Susan, and what could have transpired in those few hours to lead to such a tragic outcome? As the investigation unfolded, attention inevitably turned to Susan's recent divorce. In many cases, estranged partners become persons of interest, and Michael Woods was no exception. However, investigators were careful not to narrow their focus too quickly, aware that overlooking potential leads could jeopardize the case. The fingerprints and cigarette butts found at the scene offered tangible leads for the police to pursue. These pieces of evidence held the potential to identify Susan's killer, but in 1987, forensic technology was far from what it is today. The process of analyzing and matching this evidence would prove to be a long and challenging journey. As investigators began their long journey to analyze the evidence, they couldn't ignore the whispers circulating through Stephenville. The small Texas town was abuzz with speculation, and one name kept surfacing: Michael Woods, Susan's estranged husband. The couple's tumultuous relationship had become common knowledge, and now it cast a dark shadow over Michael. The Woods marriage had been far from idyllic. Financial struggles plagued the couple, with Michael, a musician, finding it difficult to secure work in Stephenville. Susan shouldered the burden, working full-time to keep them afloat. The strain eventually became too much, leading Michael to move back to Indiana to assist his brother with an apartment building. But his departure left more than just physical distance between them. Before leaving, Michael had penned hurtful notes to Susan and even recorded a cassette tape filled with bitter grievances. These actions painted a picture of a man harboring deep resentment, fueling suspicions among investigators and townsfolk alike. Sergeant Donnie Hensley, leading the investigation, noted a troubling pattern in his interviews. Everybody I talked to said she was scared of Mike. This widespread perception of fear only intensified the focus on Michael as a prime suspect. Despite being in Indianapolis at the time of Susan's death, investigators couldn't dismiss the possibility that Michael had secretly returned to Texas to commit the crime. The geographical distance wasn't enough to clear his name, especially given the emotional turmoil that had preceded his departure. However, as the investigation progressed, a significant hurdle emerged. Michael had an alibi for his whereabouts, and there was a glaring lack of physical evidence connecting him to the murder scene. The weight of suspicion took a heavy toll on Michael's life in the years that followed. He found himself caught in a web of constant scrutiny, not just from law enforcement, but from Susan's family and the entire community. The pressure was immense, leading to a state of paranoia and deep emotional distress. Barbara Gary, a friend of Michael's, witnessed the devastating impact firsthand. She described the situation as killing Michael and his family, prompting her to reach out to the police, desperately seeking updates on the case's progress. As months turned into years, the case remained unsolved, and Michael continued to live under a cloud of suspicion. The lack of closure not only affected him, but also left the community on edge, wondering if a killer was still walking among them. Investigators, frustrated by the lack of concrete evidence, found themselves at an impasse. The fingerprints and cigarette butts from the crime scene, once promising leads, had yielded no definitive answers. In 2005, nearly 2 decades after Susan Wood's murder, the case was reopened with a renewed focus on solving the crime. A determined detective, Lieutenant Don Miller of the Stephenville Police Department, utilized advancements in forensic science to finally bring Susan's killer to justice. Lieutenant Miller began by re-examining the evidence with a focus on the cigarette butts found at the crime scene. These overlooked pieces of evidence were sent to a state-of-the-art crime lab for DNA testing. When the results came back, they revealed male DNA, but the profile did not match any known suspects. Undeterred, Miller expanded his investigation. In 2006, a major breakthrough occurred when the Texas Department of Public Safety gained access to the FBI's computerized fingerprint database. This allowed Miller to revisit the fingerprints collected from Susan's bathtub, which had remained in storage for nearly 2 decades. With meticulous documentation and coordination, the prints were submitted for comparison against the FBI's extensive database. The system returned a match. The fingerprints from Susan's bathtub belonged to Joseph Scott Hatley, a man with a prior criminal record. Investigators quickly identified Hatley, but the question remained: who was he, and how was he connected to Susan Woods? As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Hatley wasn't a stranger to Susan's world. He was connected to her through mutual acquaintances. With this breakthrough, the pace of the investigation accelerated rapidly. Armed with solid physical evidence linking Hatley to the crime scene, law enforcement moved quickly to make an arrest. In 2006, nearly 2 decades after Susan's brutal murder, Joseph Scott Hatley was taken into custody. Hatley's involvement had been concealed for years. As he blended into the community, even attending Susan's funeral, further investigation revealed a troubling history of violence, including a prior assault on a 16-year-old girl, Shannon Myers Barrientos, where he had held her head underwater and threatened her life, chillingly stating, "I've killed before." Under questioning, Hatley admitted to murdering Susan Woods. He confessed that on the night of July 28, 1987, Susan rejected his advances, which enraged him. This triggered a violent outburst. Hatley described losing control, stating, "By the time I came out of the fog, I had brutalized her." Hatley's confession included graphic details that matched the evidence at the scene. Combined with his confession, the physical evidence gave prosecutors a strong case. In 2006, Hatley accepted a plea deal for Susan's murder. He received a 30-year sentence, but was eligible for parole after serving 12 years due to sentencing laws from the time of the crime. Hatley was released in 2018, sparking debate about sentencing adequacy for violent crimes. While he expressed remorse, calling his actions madness, and claiming to have changed, his release provided little comfort to those who lost Susan. The resolution of Susan Wood's murder highlights the transformative role of forensic science in cold case investigations. Decades-old evidence helped deliver answers to a grieving family. Yet, the case raises questions about the balance between punishment and rehabilitation in the justice system. That concludes today's story. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.